I am a part of Zakarisons partnership. So, up until the spring of 2019, we were, forgive me for saying this, a conventional farm. We did some minimal till, but mostly it was very conventional tillage, especially when we had scope creep and recreation take part. We also followed the fertility recommendations from our agronomists, so we put on our fertilizers, we put on our pesticides when and where they were recommended. And we had pretty good yields. In fact, in 2018, the weather was perfect. We put everything down at the right time, etc., and had one of the best wheat yields we've ever had. And when I did the numbers, it was our least profitable crop. So what we also have on our ground is some very nice soils that are very productive, and we have some very degraded soils. And the degraded soils, including the pieces that were hilltops and CRP, were doing more poorly over time. So we had high input costs and lower revenue, and we do our barley and peas, because we grow wheat, barley, and peas. Our barley and peas are marketed directly, but our wheat goes through the regular channels. And we had significant erosion. So whenever we had serious rain events on frozen ground or ground that had been worked recreationally, or because that was what we thought we had to do to get a decent crop, we had serious erosion. Now what? So this is an example of some of the ground that's poor on our place. It's very wet for part of the year, and then it dries out and cracks. And the stands are so-so. So what we did last year was really decided to change our attitude and change how we think about how we're farming, because we had to. We couldn't continue with the inputs, with the tillage that we were doing, and expect to survive in the long term. So what we did was we adopted the 5 principles of soil health, and we created a holistic goal for our farm. And we also really talked a lot about just the changes in our attitude. So the question was, what is a good crop? What is a good crop? Is it the uniform, monoculture, no weeds, everything's done correctly? Or is it something that looks a little different than that? We also talked about the aesthetics. So we actually did have a bunch of intercropping that we did that was on the highway. It was up close and personal, and trucks would drive by and you'd see the brake lights come on. and people would actually come up and ask, what are you doing? So we also talked about what that meant as far as yields and costs per acre, because we also knew we had to reduce our cost per acre. So our goal, our farm goal that we worked on and decided to settle on, which informs all of the decisions that we make, is to farm in such a way that we have healthy soils, that we have healthy farmers, we have healthy finances, and we have functioning ecosystems. We have functioning nutrient cycling in our soils, we have functioning water cycling, and that we then, as we learn from what we're doing, that we can share that with anyone else who wants to know. So we concluded within that what we had to do was get our soil biology back up and functioning. And how we decided to do that was to apply the 5 principles of soil health. We traded in our 455s last spring and got 1890s. So we did a couple of things like really wrong, because we converted our entire farm. We got a new drill, so we had to learn that. But we started and haven't looked back. We are minimizing the disturbance, so we went no-till. And we are minimizing the disturbance both as far as mechanical disturbance and chemical disturbance. We're increasing our diversity. We intercropped our cash crops last year, and we intercropped our winter wheat crop this year. And then we have about 9 or 10 acres that we've just been running multi-species crops on just to see what will grow. Shield the soil. Now, for the sake of transparency, this looks really great. What we realized is our carbon to nitrogen ratios are not correct. So this soil is now, it's got winter grains growing on it. It's part of our cover crop system, our multi-species. But all the little microbes and everything ate this away. It's not eroding, and it's in good shape, but we definitely need to work harder at shielding our soil. And living roots. We had intercropped, and we decided that we would put a few perennials in there, and we're actually talking about how can we get a couple more into our annual cropped fields. So what we're thinking about is maybe some small brunette, maybe some small polite grass, and then we also put in some red clover that we will just let be. Livestock is the last one, and this is the one that stumps us. We do have a small flock of hair sheep and some meat goats, but we're not sure how to incorporate this part into our system and our farm at this point. We're still having conversations about it. It doesn't quite work in the context of our farm. And that leads to the 6th principle, and this is one that Gabe Brown really emphasizes, is that all of these we do within the context of our farm. And it's the one thing that I think I would say to anyone watching this presentation is that it's all within the context of your farm, what makes sense for your farm, where your farm is at, what you have to answer to, because ours is different than everyone else's. But we are all in this together. And if I have a healthy farm, but my neighbors don't, it affects me, just as my healthy farm affects them, or my good soils affect people. And if we're not all in this together and learning together, we're not gonna make it. So what we decided, the 3 things that we were gonna do is increase our nutrient cycling, we're gonna increase our organic matter, and we're gonna increase our water infiltration. The importance, all of these kind of create a virtuous cycle if you can get them up and running. What I really truly believe is that our climate is getting to the point where our rain events are becoming very unpredictable. So we get the horribly heavy rainfalls in April of last year where we had a flash flood here. And then we have dry Novembers like we had this last year, where, you know, it was one of the driest, not on record driest, but one of the 4 or 5 driest that we've had. And I think that's the rainfall pattern that we're gonna have to anticipate. And the only way that I feel we can really work with that is to have resilient soils. And the way to have resilient soils is to make sure the biology's up and running, to make sure that you've got all of the cycles going, that you've got organic matter to feed that biology, and then you can have that water infiltration so that we have effective rainfall. So I have 21 to 23 inches, give or take a few, where we farm. But if it's hitting ground that's frozen, if it's hitting ground that's hard, that's not the rainfall I'm seeing. What we do when we till and when we don't treat our soils well is we basically are saying you're in a drought situation. You are not keeping the water that's coming down. And the rainfall is, what the rainfall is not what you're keeping. It's not the effective rainfall. So what we did, we stopped tilling. So we just went cold turkey, and I really did violate like a lot of rules of science and everything else when we did this. We stopped tilling. We used untreated seed. We stopped using treated seed, which meant that my nails, I had a little shorter nails. It's like, well, okay. But we realized we had stopped treating our pea seed a couple of years ago and had not seen a significant problem with our stand. We did not treat our barley seed last year, and we were fine. We had some Pythium and some Rhizog, but I put that down to the fact that we need to really pay attention to our soil biology, and it wasn't significant. And then we did not treat our wheat seed this year. What we did do was we put a biological inoculant in with our seed that had some humic acid, so it had some carbons, and it had mycorrhizal inoculants and some pseudomonads and other bacteria that will help us get our cycling up. It's a good stand. It came up. We did not see any problems with it. And the other thing is, the reason we didn't use treated seed was because what we didn't want to do was put a broad spectrum pesticide and fungicide into our ground, because that defeats our purpose of getting nutrient cycling in the microbiome up. We also reduced our fertilizer rates. So we went from 120 pounds, and we did split applications, and we had switched from anhydrous to solution 32 about 5 years ago, which was a vast improvement just doing that. But we put on 50 pounds of nitrogen last year for our barley crop, nothing on our peas, no starter fertilizer. And then this year again, with our winter wheat, we put on about 50 pounds of solution 32 with 5 pounds of sulfur. And we will go through this year with our wheat, do some sap tests, and see what we need to do as far as micronutrients. I'm pretty sure we're deficient and that we will need to do some foliar spraying. So anyway, with our barley crop last year, we intercropped it as well. And with our barley crop, we ended up with 2 tons to an acre. And that was with a new seeder, which I think is as significant a yield as you can get when you're trying to learn it. Reduced fertilizer rates, no tillage, and no treated seed. We spot spray where we need to. And what that means for us now is, I go out, I scout the fields, and I look at the weeds, and I'm trying to figure out what they're telling me. I'm kind of illiterate. I have no idea what they're telling me at this point, so I've got to figure out a plan for understanding what they're telling me. And then what we will do, if we feel it's compromising the crop, we will spot spray. But what we want to get to is not spraying. Because the thing is that what we noticed, we hit the panic button at one point last year because there was some lamb's quarter coming up. We sprayed, spot sprayed, and the crop did worse in those areas than when we just left it alone. Because the sprays hurt the crop. And we intercropped our cash crops. So we had some CRP hilltops that came out, and we were worried about them because the fields they were in our pea rotations, and peas not great for residue. So we intercropped, we put peas and oats together, and then we put in a little bit of radish because we knew we needed to get some of those nutrients back up to the surface on those hilltops. And then we also, with our barley, intercropped it, so we did radish, barley, we did clover, and we did turnips, which isn't a really diverse crop, but it was what we felt comfortable with at that point. And I'm here to tell you, do not plant more than half a pound of radishes in a crop, because you end up with really unhappy harvesters, people combining. And our theory is, what we're doing is we're intercropping, and what we're doing is having a fairly low, the intercrops are low, so that we can keep our header up and then harvest the barley. I will say that we have some room to maneuver because we sell the barley ourselves and as feed, and people are very supportive with what we're doing, and radishes add nutrients to our feed. But it really does take a few years off of the people who are harvesting. We also set aside ground and planted insect areas. We figured, there's a part where we take a lot, and we ask a lot of our farm and our ground and our environment, and why not give back some? So what we did was we put some insectaries in places that are mud holes, that are off of waterways that we have. And we did 5 insectaries, 4 of them did really well. 1, meh, not so much, but I'm pretty sure we're also dealing with a lot of residue carryover from herbicides that we've sprayed before. They did a fabulous job, and they beat out the Italian rye. There was no Italian rye where we had those insectaries. And then we partnered, I put it as partner. I actually bothered. PCD, WSU, U of I used all the resources available to us. We used USDA, ARS, and NRCS, and they were just fabulous. We are really lucky we have some research plots on our farm that are transitioning from conventional to organic, and they've been fabulous to work with. PCD is great, and I'm a biased person, but they're still great. And WSU and U of I have just been wonderful, and NRCS, I can't speak enough for how important they've been to what we've been doing. Observations: never ever plant more than half a pound per acre of radishes. I mean, it was really great because where the ground was good, and it was kind of a ground proofing. Where the ground was good, the crop was unbelievable. We got 4 tons to the acre. Where the ground was bad, it was horrible. It really told us where our degraded soils were. And the radishes that were in with the barley, that was the barley that did the best. And not only that, but the barley was this high, it was Lenata, and the radish kept it upright. It wasn't looking for some place to lie down. So I'm to tell you that this is not during the growing season. I'm really supposed to emphasize, this was in October in our barley fields, and this is just a turnip. There's a pretty nifty video of Ryan juggling turnips out of this field, and there were some pretty spectacular sized turnips in this field, just dry land. And why we did the radishes and the turnips was so that we could get the nutrients up, but we could also disperse some of that carbon in that upper layer of the soil to feed microbes and the microbiota over the winter. This is where the ground is really degraded, and something that we have to figure out what we're going to do. And we think what we'll probably do is probably try to put more carbon on it. So we'll put compost on it, maybe do some compost teas, maybe take it out and just devote it to cover crops. Big turnip. Some of these things were so big I would tell my father-in-law, okay, when you drive over it with the combine, don't flip the combine. This is the insectary we had, and for all the gardeners, we had marigolds in there that just grew. We had nasturtiums. It was just the most wonderful mix, and the diversity of pollinators and beneficials that we had was incredible. This is the field that we planted our winter wheat in. So all we did was we streamed on 50 pounds of solution 32 with 5 pounds of sulfur, and then went in with our mix. And what we do is we have a grinder mixer, so we put our seed into the mixing part of the grinder, mix everything up, and kind of use our cash crop seed, the bigger seed, as our filler. And it works. So this cover crop, this winter cover crop, had flax, winter wheat, Morton lentils, a little bit of only half a pound of radish, and then balansa and red clover, so that we could insert some perennials and get some diversity. I don't know how well this works because, it was kind of a weird winter, and the ground was so mellow that we got it in fairly deep, but the wheat did come up and it looked really good. And that's the only disturbance we have. So I've started now my equipment, and I was trying to figure out how I'm going to do this year. It's a shovel, a penetrometer, and then I have this nifty biology testing kit. But I got to figure out how to drag it around with me out in the fields because I like walking. So I think I'm going to have to get a big backpack. And this is the beginning of our wheat crop, and you can see the lentils up there. So this is, I don't know if this will do it. Yes, this is our hair sheep, and basically this is my philosophy. You know, we need to realize that we're a part of nature, and that in order for us to thrive, nature has to thrive. And then I was also instructed to wait until to not stop this until you see the photobomb. It's coming.
Oh.
Those guys are like, ooh. Thank you.